Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place where silence is weight. A convent deep in the medieval hills, where words are rationed like water, and every whisper echoes like sin. You're standing in a cold stone corridor, candlelight trembling on the walls, the air thick with incense and restraint. The nuns here live under a vow of silence, their prayers whispered only in thought, their hands speaking through the slow ballet of daily chores. But one of them, one woman hidden among these pale habits, refuses to let her mind be muzzled. Her name is Hildegard, or perhaps she's called by another. History can't quite agree. All we know is that she dared to write when no one was supposed to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the cloister garden, past sleeping herbs and frost-stiffened roses. The wind sighs through the arches, almost like it's reciting a forgotten song. You can hear the bells toll, low, patient, unhurried. Somewhere, a quill scratches faintly, a sound out of place among all this piety. That's her, the nun who will one day confuse scholars and computers alike. The one who decided that if language was God's gift to men, then she'd make her own. Her days are ruled by obedience. She rises before dawn, eats her bread in silence, scrubs floors until her hands ache. Her only joy is the moment after Compline, when the world is wrapped in night and the other sisters sleep. Then, by the faint light of a tallow candle, she writes lines and loops and symbols that look a little like Latin, a little like madness. You squint, trying to read, but the shapes swim before your eyes like tiny fishes. The convent around her is the kind of place built to erase individuality. The walls are thick, not just to keep out the cold, but to keep thoughts from escaping. Each sister wears the same habit, chants the same prayers, dreams the same sanctioned dreams. And yet, this woman's mind sparks like flint against all that's stone. You could almost feel her frustration humming through the air, a silent rebellion in every breath she takes. The rules say, speak only in prayer. She obeys, sort of. Her prayers become experiments. Her syllables twist into something no priest has ever heard before. Historians still argue whether she meant to create a language or merely fell into it, like a sleepwalker wandering into poetry. One mainstream account says she was inspired by divine visions. Another claims she simply loved the sound of sound itself, the rhythm of meaning stripped of its cage. And you, quiet observer, half-ghost in this medieval night, can sense the risk to invent language is to play God, and women in this age aren't supposed to do either. One wrong line. One curious abbot peering too closely at her pages, and she could be accused of heresy. You imagine her smuggling her manuscripts beneath her mattress, whispering the new words only to herself as she needs bread or tends the garden. A fringe theory, the kind only whispered in university hallways, suggests she wasn't alone. That her sisters, too, began using her secret words, simple greetings, hidden prayers, a whole undercurrent of female thought beneath the abbey's polite Latin surface. But no one knows. The abbess records are silent. Or maybe they were burned. You picture her walking down the cloister, candle cupped in her hand, eyes bright despite the rules. She's inventing something vast, a private cosmos built entirely of ink. A place where she can think freely, where words belong to her, and not to the church or to any man with a mitre and a quill. The other nuns might think her odd, even dangerous, but there's awe in their glances too, a kind of holy envy. And as the night thickens, so does the air. You feel the centuries closing around you. The sound of her pen slows. Maybe she's run out of parchment. Maybe she's run out of courage. Or maybe, just maybe, she's realized that she's no longer writing for herself, but for whoever might find this centuries later. You, sitting in the glow of your screen, the fan humming, the world outside asleep. The candle flickers. The page gleams. Her hand trembles, but doesn't stop. And you think, silence was never meant to win. You wake to the sound of quills. The convent is quiet, but not silent. Somewhere between matins and lauds, while most of the sisters are still half dreaming of saints and scripture, she's already writing. Her candle gutters in the draught, smoke curling upward like a tiny ghost of thought. You creep closer, your breath fogging in the cold morning air, and watch her hand move across the parchment. It's quick, purposeful, fevered. She isn't copying holy text. She's creating. The ink stains her fingers black, but she doesn't care. Her eyes are distant, fixed on something beyond the wall, a light only she can see. To anyone else, her words are nonsense. Lines of script that twist like vines, dots that seem to breathe. But she whispers as she writes, syllables spilling out softly. Igra, Eisen Olo. Her language hums with rhythm, and even though you don't understand it, part of you feels it. Historians still argue whether this was divine inspiration or a nervous breakdown. Some describe her as a visionary, an early mystic, much like Hildegard of Bingen, who once claimed to hear God's voice in the wind. Others insist she was simply exhausted, her mind fractured under the weight of isolation. After all, this was an age when women were discouraged from thinking too hard, especially about heaven. A fever, a migraine, a touch of fasting-induced delirium. These could all look a lot like prophecy in the right lighting. But she's not raving. Watch her more closely. Every mark she makes is balance. Structure, rhythm. It's as if the letters come from a place of logic and ecstasy both. The mainstream record says she created around 200 unique symbols, an entire alphabet, complete with its own grammar and syntax. But what no scholar can quite explain is why. No translation has ever worked. No one knows if her words had meaning, or if they were meant to transcend meaning altogether. You notice her parchment pile growing. She's been at this for hours, maybe days. The ink runs thinner where she's stretched it with water. Her candle burns dangerously low, and yet she smiles faintly, as if she's listening to someone whispering right beside her ear. Maybe she believes it's an angel. Maybe it's her own thoughts, dressed in wings. The abbey bell rings for prime. The nuns shuffle to the chapel, veils fluttering. She lingers behind, pressing her palm flat against the page before hiding it beneath a loose floorboard. You follow her down the corridor, feet barely making a sound on the cold flagstones. Her face, when the sunlight finally catches it, is pale but alive with something fierce, like the quiet joy of someone keeping a secret too beautiful to share. A French historian once wrote that her language was a spiritual encryption, a code that only God could read. Others think she was simply lonely, inventing an imaginary friend who spoke in syllables no one else could mimic. And yet, you can't help but feel that there's genius here, the kind that history too often mistakes for madness. Later that day, during a rare pause in her chores, she pulls a tiny scrap of vellum from her sleeve and adds another line. This time, it looks different, sharper, faster, like she's trying to capture a sound before it fades. You can almost hear it, that high, ringing tone of inspiration. It's not music, not quite, but it hovers somewhere near the idea of song. Her sisters have noticed. A few whisper behind her back. One claims she saw the strange script glowing faintly in moonlight, which is probably an exaggeration, but rumors in a convent spread faster than wax melts. Soon, even the abbess grows wary. She orders the strange pages locked away in the library chest, next to relics and bones of saints. But the nun keeps writing. Always more. You wonder if she even knows she's inventing something revolutionary. To her, it might just be another prayer. Something between her and God. A private way of saying what Latin never could. Maybe that's what makes it dangerous. Because a woman who can speak to heaven without permission is a woman who doesn't need an intermediary. And in the medieval world, that's the same as rebellion. She finishes one last symbol. A shape that loops twice before ending in a sharp flick. You can't help thinking it looks a little like a heartbeat frozen on the page. Her hand trembles again. Maybe she's tired. Or maybe she's realized what she's done. She's written herself out of silence. And somewhere, far away in the centuries to come, her ink will still be fresh in someone's mind. You lean closer to the parchment, and now, under the flickering lamplight, it becomes clear. This isn't just random invention. It's an alphabet. A new one. Each symbol balanced like a tiny painting, elegant as lace, strange as birdsong. Loops curl into one another with mathematical grace. Dots dance around stems, like stars orbiting invisible planets. She calls it, you think, the Lingua Ignota, the unknown language. The name itself sounds like something half-whispered by angels. She doesn't explain how it came to her. Maybe she can't. In her visions, fevers, dreams, or revelations, letters appear, glowing at the edges of her mind. When she wakes, she copies them as best she can, fearing they'll vanish like breath on glass. To her, each mark feels sacred, as if writing them connects her to something vast and holy. She believes that by crafting her own words, she can reach God directly. No priestly filter, no Latin middleman. Historians still argue whether her alphabet was divinely inspired or carefully constructed. Some call it the first example of conlanging, centuries before Tolkien or Esperanto. Others say it wasn't a language at all, but a spiritual shorthand for emotions she couldn't name in Latin or German. One even proposed that the letters weren't linguistic symbols at all. They were musical notes. That theory didn't last long, but it's strangely beautiful, isn't it? The idea that heaven might be humming in calligraphy. The mainstream record agrees on one thing. She did it all herself. No counsel, no male scholars guiding her hand. Just parchment, ink, and relentless faith. Each letter is distinct yet harmonious, as if shaped by instinct rather than rule. The alphabet contains strange hybrids, part Latin, part runic, part entirely alien. It's the kind of writing that feels like it's looking back at you. You imagine her sitting at a wooden desk in the scriptorium, surrounded by manuscripts penned by men, Bibles, psalters, psalm commentaries, and here she is, quietly breaking the monopoly of meaning. The scratch of her quill becomes a drumbeat of defiance. One of the sisters walks by, pauses, and frowns. "What tongue is this?" she whispers. The nun just smiles, tucks the parchment away, and says, "A prayer you wouldn't understand." A fringe account claims she described the letters as gifts from the living light. A phrase that still makes academics squirm. It's mystical, poetic, unprovable. But then again, most breakthroughs begin that way. Even Einstein once said imagination was more important than knowledge. And here, in this cold convent, centuries before relativity, a woman is bending imagination into form. Outside, snow begins to fall. You watch her trace one symbol again and again, refining it as if she's trying to perfect the sound of grace. She murmurs to herself in the new tongue, and though you don't understand a word, it feels strangely calming, like the hum of distant prayer or static from a divine radio. Soon, her desk becomes a nest of pages, each one marked with words no one else can read. The abbess, growing uneasy, forbids her to continue. But by now it's too late. The language is alive. It's in her head, her lips, her heartbeat. She can't stop speaking it even in sleep. And the danger grows. The church has always feared what it cannot translate. Unknown words could hide heresy, witchcraft, or worse, truth. Yet, despite the risk, she begins teaching her favorite novices to write a few letters in secret. At first, they giggle at the strangeness of it, tracing curves with awkward fingers. Then, slowly, they start using it in notes, prayers, the margins of psalms. Hidden communication blooms under the surface of obedience. Historians still debate whether any of those novices survived the eventual inquiry. The church was not kind to women who invented things, especially sacred ones. But her alphabet endured, copied and recopied across generations of nuns, traveling in secret from convent to convent like a spark under ashes. You hold one of those old pages now. The parchment smells of dust and beeswax. The ink has faded to brown, but the shapes still shimmer faintly, as though the letters themselves refuse to die. You trace one with your fingertip and feel a shiver, not fear exactly, but recognition. This isn't just her alphabet. It's her soul, translated into geometry. You realize something then. Language doesn't just describe the world, it builds it. And for this nun, the world she built was one where silence no longer ruled. The air inside the abbey grows tense. You can almost taste it. Dust and fear. The metallic scent of candle smoke curling through the chapel. The sisters move a little faster now, speak a little softer, glance more often at the doorway. Something is coming. The whispers about her alphabet have reached ears that don't belong to the convent anymore. A rider arrived yesterday from the bishop's palace. His boots left muddy prints across the cloister stones, his cloak dripping from the rain. He didn't speak much, just handed the abbess a sealed letter and waited. Now, as you pass the refectory, you can hear voices behind the heavy door. The abbess murmurs. The bishop's envoy replies, sharp and cold. Words like examination, heresy, divine claims. You know how this goes. Our nun sits in the chapel, pretending to pray, though her mind races. The secret alphabet, the one she thought was just between her and heaven, has been found. A careless novice must have dropped a scrap, or maybe someone confessed in fear. The parchment has already been sent to scholars for review, and somewhere in a candlelit study, a man in robes is frowning over her script, declaring it suspiciously feminine. She can't stop writing, though, even as danger coils around her. She hides news sheets in the hollow of a wall, beneath the choir stalls, inside the lining of her habit. The act itself has become a kind of worship. You watch her late at night, her face pale with exhaustion, her hand trembling but unrelenting. The mainstream records say the bishop's investigator eventually arrived, a man trained to sniff out unorthodox behavior like a hound. He questions her kindly at first, then sternly. What do these symbols mean? Who taught you this? Did you receive them from God? or from somewhere else? Historians still argue whether she lied or told the truth that day. Some say she claimed divine origin to protect herself. If God dictated it, no one could accuse her of rebellion. Others believe she truly believed it, that the living light she spoke of was as real to her as the candle's flame before her eyes. The investigator leaves unsatisfied, muttering about delirious sanctity. The abbess, torn between fear and affection, orders all her writings confiscated. But one of the sisters, perhaps one who learned a few letters, disobeys. She hides a bundle of pages behind the chapel's plaster wall, sealing them in with wet lime. Those pages will sleep there for centuries. A fringe legend says that on the night the investigation ended, the nun stood before the crucifix and prayed in her language for hours, whispering to the figure on the cross, as though they shared a private joke. Some claim the candles flickered blue, others swore the walls hummed. More likely, it was just wind and fear playing tricks on tired eyes. But still, you can't shake the image. A woman and her God, speaking in code while the world burns quietly outside. Days pass. The abbey resumes its routines. Bread baked, floors scrubbed, psalms chanted. The surface peace returns, but you can feel the undercurrent. Something permanent has shifted. The younger nuns still glance at her with awe, as if she's seen the edge of heaven. The older ones look away, pretending nothing happened. Silence is safer. Years later, the nun grows frail. Her hair turns silver beneath her veil, her eyes cloud with age, but her memory of that alphabet remains sharp. She no longer writes, but sometimes, in the long hours of dusk, she murmurs a single word from her language under her breath, smiling faintly, like a woman reciting a secret lullaby. You stand near her as she dies. The sisters gather, chanting the Latin prayers for the dead, but her lips form different shapes. She's speaking in the unknown tongue, her own invention, her last confession, her final song. No priest will ever translate it. Maybe it doesn't need translation. Maybe that's the point. Centuries pass. The abbey falls silent, then abandoned. Dust replaces incense. But beneath one crumbling wall, her words remain, sealed in the plaster, waiting for rediscovery. Historians, cryptographers, priests, all will argue about her intent. Was she mad? Was she a genius? A heretic? A prophet? You smile in the dim candlelight of your own century, because you know what they'll never quite understand. She wasn't trying to be any of those things. She was trying to be heard. Centuries later, you're standing in a museum archive that smells faintly of parchment and lemon oil. The air hums with the soft whir of dehumidifiers, and on a long oak table lies the thing she left behind, the manuscript that shouldn't have survived. It's smaller than you imagined, about the size of a prayer book, the vellum yellowed, the ink browned. Yet the letters still dance. You lean over it carefully, tracing your eyes along the alien curves that no one has ever truly read. Scholars call it a cipher, but the code refuses to break. Even modern cryptographers, armed with algorithms and machine learning, can't find a consistent pattern. Some say the structure resembles Latin. Others detect traces of Germanic rhythm. But every time they think they've cracked it, the logic slips like water through fingers. Historians still argue whether this proves her language was pure invention or something deeper, a private system so personal it transcends understanding. You imagine her smiling somewhere, amused that even now, after 8 centuries, no one can silence her words. She built something unstealable, a fortress made of soundless symbols. And somehow, you feel her there beside you, her faint voice murmuring from between the lines. A mainstream historian once called her the mother of linguistic imagination. Another dismissed her as a pious eccentric. But those who've stared at her script long enough begin to feel what you feel now, that the alphabet itself seems alive. Some letters bloom like petals, others curl like vines. Each one seems to breathe, not with grammar, but with pulse. A fringe theory, admittedly romantic, claims the language works only when spoken in faith. That to truly read it, you must believe in it, as she did. You chuckle softly. That's a terrible scientific argument, but a perfect poetic one. As you read, your mind drifts. You picture her centuries ago, bent over her candle, the same letters forming beneath her trembling hand. You realize she didn't just invent a way to speak, she invented a way to exist. In an age where obedience was survival, she carved a secret door into her own freedom. It's strange how her defiance feels gentle, almost tender. No wars, no proclamations, just a quill scratching through curfew hours, a quiet rebellion written in ink. The church could confiscate her papers, but it couldn't confiscate meaning, because meaning, once created, lingers, like smoke in old stone. A modern linguist once fed her script into an AI translator. The program generated nothing but nonsense, strings of syllables that read like poetry. Lines such as, "I Luna sings where no ears are," and "The fire writes in circles." The linguist thought it was random noise. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe the machine, in its own cold way, caught a glimpse of her rhythm, the untranslatable pulse of creation itself. You blink, and the letters seem to shimmer under the lamplight. For a heartbeat, you think you see motion, words rearranging, symbols leaning toward one another, as if trying to whisper across centuries. You rub your eyes, laugh quietly. Maybe it's fatigue. Or maybe, just maybe, you've finally tuned into the same wavelength she did. The archivist walks by, smiling politely, unaware that in this small, silent room, a miracle is humming softly between pages. The world outside is loud and modern, emails, deadlines, neon lights, but here, time has folded back on itself. You and the nun are sharing a sentence that neither of you can read but both somehow understand. And as you close the manuscript, the realization settles in. Her language was never meant to be solved. It wasn't a code to crack. It was a feeling to inhabit. A reminder that sometimes, meaning lives not in translation, but in the act of creation itself. You exhale. The hum of the dehumidifier blends with the soft rhythm of your heartbeat. The story could end here, but it doesn't feel like an ending, more like a long sigh, a candle slowly burning out. The room is quiet now. The lights dim a little, and the museum fades into something softer, a blur of parchment, shadow, and time. You lean back in your chair, listening to your own breath, slow and steady, like the turning of old pages. Somewhere far away, the convent bells you imagine still ring across the centuries, calling no one in particular. You think of her one last time, the nun who wrote when she wasn't supposed to. Her hands were small, her voice unheard, yet her language outlasted empires. Maybe that's what she wanted, not immortality, but acknowledgement. The kind that doesn't come with applause or monuments, but with a stranger, centuries later, whispering her story under their breath. The air feels thick, almost tender. You can still picture her candlelight flickering against the walls, her quill tracing impossible shapes. You imagine her whispering one of her words again, that soft, secret syllable that no one ever understood. And suddenly you realize it doesn't matter that you don't. You feel it. That's enough. Let that be tonight's ending. A gentle hum of connection across centuries. The nun's candle goes out. The convent sleeps. And you, listener, sink slowly into that same darkness, safe and warm, where all languages fade into breath, and all stories become dreams. Good night.